So then just to move on to the nitrogen plan, and I suppose, so look, nitrogen was our friend, I suppose, a couple of years ago, and now it's our enemy, and I suppose it's been pointing the finger to for a lot of your environmental issues and water quality. So I suppose we have a lot of farmers have been in contact with us just to say, just to give us recommendations on how much fertilizer to put out at a particular time in the year. So I suppose that's where the idea of this nitrogen plan came from. It's available on the browser, so you have to log into the website, www.pbi.ie, and it's under the fertilizer and slurry application tab. So there's probably three main principles, I suppose, to the plan, or three main steps. The first one is to calculate the slurry which is available on the farm. The second one there is to allocate the paddocks to a particular use. So you will have grazing paddocks, you will have paddocks which are, I suppose, grazing and are closed up for a cut of silage. And some paddocks then are used for grazing and 2 cuts of silage, for example. And then finally, I suppose you have to choose the fertilizer product and the amount of slurry that you need to apply on the particular paddock. So if you just log into PastureBase here for 1 second, and we can go through an example. So if we just go through that there again, if we go into fertilizer here, slurry, into new nitrogen plan, it'll ask you there just to put in the name of it, and I suppose how much chemical nitrogen you want to apply per hectare. So it defaults at 250, and you can update it there if you want. Then it brings you up here to the setup page. So there is the first part of it here, I suppose, is just to calculate how much slurry is on the farm. The next part then is just allocating your paddock to a different use here on the right hand side, and down the bottom then we just get some summary information. So if we just start here, for example, we just put in the number of cows, I suppose, that were housed over the winter period. So we have 105 cows, for example, and we put them in there for 16 weeks. I suppose we'll have some maiden heifers. We'll put them in for a bit longer. And again, maybe some in-calf heifers. And we'll put them in for the same as the cows. So you can see here, I suppose we're calculating, we have the weekly cubic meters of slurry produced per animal or per stock type. And then I suppose up in the top right hand corner here, you can see that the amount of slurry on the farm in cubic meters and in gallons here is calculated on the top right hand corner. You can edit, I suppose you can kind of customize this to yourself, that you can delete different stock types, and you can also, I suppose, include new stock types if they're not already on your list here. So if we just click on save there, for example, and that calculates the slurry for us here. So I suppose you can see, I suppose we're not calculating slurry from collecting yards or from dirty water or from silage pits, for example. So it is, I suppose, a crude enough way in calculating the slurry on the farm. But if you have other information, be it from NMP Online, for example, or that you'll have X amount of gallons usually every year, you can edit these values here in order just to get your I suppose your slurry more accurate. So if you had a round tower, for example, you could just put in one stock bull for 1 week and put in maybe 250,000 gallons here, or put it in cubic meters in order to get your slurry more accurate. So I suppose it's pretty flexible there in order to get the right amount of slurry. Then just to move on, then the paddock allocation. So we have our list of paddocks here. We have 20 paddocks on the farm. You can see on the right hand side here that they all default to grazing. So I suppose we'll just put some of these here that are used for grazing and one cut of silage. And if we move on, then I suppose you can see the different examples or the different uses. So you have, if a paddock wasn't included, maybe something like a calf paddock or maybe ground that you don't apply fertilizer on, grazing plus 1 cut, grazing plus 2 cuts, and then we have this grazing with a lot of clover on it. And I'll explain that clover one there later. So if we just put paddock 10 there into, there's a lot of clover in paddock 10, over 25%, and it's mainly used for grazing. So I suppose we've allocated a use to each paddock now at this stage. And also just to draw your attention here to, I suppose, this tick box, that we want to apply slurry to all these paddocks here. And for example, we can untick them there if we're not going to apply slurry on it. So I suppose just by default, they're all selected, and you can unselect them there if you wish. So again, you can just keep clicking on save there just to make sure that everything is saved and nothing will go wrong, I suppose. Then if we just move down to the summary, we can see our different uses on the left hand side, the number of paddocks. So I suppose our grazing paddocks, we have 12. The area is just over 25 hectares, and that's about 2/3 of the farm, or just over 2/3 of the farm. Then if we move down to grazing plus 1 cut of silage, 4 paddocks, over 5.5 hectares, and that's 15% of the farm, and so on. So it just gives a breakdown there of, I suppose, what's going on in the farm. And then I suppose down to the bottom table, and I suppose this is probably a very important table here as well, that it's the percentage of chemical nitrogen that needs to be applied on a per monthly basis. So again, just to draw your attention onto the 250 kilos of N here, this is the value we put in at the start. And I suppose we've broken down our year here into different percentages. So 11% of the 250 kilos of N is going to be applied in January, February, 11% in March, 14% in April, and so on. So I suppose we went with a percentage value there rather than kilos of N. Then I suppose just to draw your attention here, I suppose, to the clover paddock, or the clover paddocks that are on the farm, a high percentage of clover. We can see that we're putting out a lot of nitrogen earlier on in the spring, early summer, and then I suppose we're weaning it off then a small bit when clover is well established in the sward, and I suppose it's fixing nitrogen as well. So that's just the difference. The difference between the clover and just normal grazing paddocks. And if you wish, I suppose, as well, that if you want to decrease the chemical nitrogen on the clover paddock, for example, down to 200 or whatever value you feel comfortable with, you can do so here. And the same with the grazing and the silage paddocks. So you can still update your chemical nitrogen if you wish at this stage. And then just the final step, I suppose, we'll just save and continue that there. The final step then, I suppose, is to select when you want to apply, I suppose, slurry. So these are our grazing paddocks here. So when you want to put out your organic fertiliser, your slurry, and then we need to choose, I suppose, what chemical fertiliser are we going to put out on the farm. So you can see here, these two boxes here are related to grazing. If we scroll down further, we have grazing plus 1 cut, grazing plus 2 cuts down further, and clover then finally at the bottom. So if we just go through this example here at the top for grazing, we have 12 paddocks, 25 hectares. So if we want to put out, you have your different slurry types here. So spring dribble bar, spring splash plate, spring trailing shoe, and spring the inject method, and then moving on to summer. So if we just go with the dribble bar, for example, 2,000 gallons. So your 2,000 gallons then equates to 21.2 kilograms of N per hectare, roughly around 17 units. So we want to, I suppose, apply 2,000 gallons across the grazing area, January, February. And then we can move on to our chemical here. We need to choose what particular product. So I suppose if we go down to P here for protected urea, should be on the list here. So you have your different types of protected urea. You can see this particular product here has 46% nitrogen. And we want to apply, I suppose, 11% of our 250. And that equates there to 27.5 kilograms of N per hectare and roughly about 23 units an acre. So if we want to get out this 27 kilos, we need to spread half a bag of this protected urea. So then if we move on to the next round, maybe you want to spread something like 18612. Again, the number of bags here are, I suppose, calculated. And if we just keep going maybe with the protected urea there, for example, in order just to finish out the chemical part of it. Maybe we might go with, just go with. So I suppose it's just that we're just worried, I suppose, about the nitrogen part of the fertilizer. So if we just put in 18612, we just go, just for time, we just put in the ones there at the top, ordinary urea. So you can see, I suppose, it gives an idea, or it gives the farmer how much fertilizer they need to spread. Again, it's on a monthly basis. I suppose it was difficult enough to go by rotation when different farmers are in different rotation lengths and different times of the year. So we have gone with a monthly figure, and I suppose farmers maybe are used to discussing maybe 1 unit a day, maybe for the summertime, and blanket spreading then probably 2 rounds maybe at the start and in the springtime, and maybe a final round in August, September. So you can see then, I suppose, the total here is calculated in the bottom year to date as we go on. And again, we'll just save that there just to ensure that we don't lose any information. And you do the exact same then for your paddocks here, which are grazing in 1 cut of silage. And I suppose just one point as well, I suppose, is you can see this 11% here. If, for example, the farm is a heavy farm or a late farm and the fertilizer mightn't be applied as early, you can also always just put in 0, and the other percentages then will update here all along. Or if you want, maybe 11 might be too high or too low or whatever. So it can be updated. You can edit the percentage that you want to apply here whenever you feel fit, I suppose. And again, you can see here the target is to apply 250 kilos of N per hectare. If we want to reduce it to 200, for example, you can see then all our rates here then have decreased as a consequence. So the plan is pretty flexible, I suppose. The main thing, I suppose, is to go in and do this plan at the start of the year, and I suppose to get your products that you have in the yard or that you're hoping to purchase into the plan. And the main thing then as well is that you are recording fertilizer applications as well on the system. And then I suppose just to draw your attention to the silage part of it. So you have grazing plus 1 cut of silage, 4 paddocks here in this example. Again, if you wanted to apply, we'd say slurry again, maybe with splash plate, 2,000 gallons. And then if we want to go with our nitrogen, maybe when we put out maybe a silage fertilizer. So look, some people put out urea and 730, some people put out 24, 2.5, 10 sort of a product. So I suppose there's different products there that can be used. Again, it'll give the farmer just a recommendation on how many bags, etc. So that's pretty much the planner. You can see here the available slurry here is after decreasing. So we're down to 3,000, nearly 3,500 gallons left. So I suppose that's just a little calculator there that as you spread slurry, the slurry in the yard decreases. So we just save it here. And just to draw your attention maybe here just to 3 reports, these blue buttons here. So this is the slurry report, chemical nitrogen, and this is the total nitrogen. So slurry plus chemical. So if we just go into the chemical here, for example, you just get your, you can see up the top here, I suppose the target there is in blue, and the black is in actual, and it's in brackets. So you can see the target there, 27 kilos of N per hectare. We haven't put out anything here yet. So the actual there is 0. And if we go down to a per paddock basis here, we can see paddock 1, 27.5, March 27.5, April 30, etc., all the way across. So I suppose it allows the farmer, I suppose, to track how much fertiliser is being applied on the paddock at any given time. So if we just go in here and we just put in a fertiliser record, so if we go in here to add new, and if we spread something like, so we'll just blanket spread it for just to make life easier, and we'll backdate it there to the in the January, and if we go with something like urea, and if we go with 23 units, we'll say, so units per acre, in 23 units, click on save, and if we go back into our plan, so down to the list, and in view plan, and it should be after updating here if we go into our chemical nitrogen. So you can see here, I suppose the target was to have, we go down to the per paddock basis first, maybe it might be a little bit easier. So the target was to have 27.5 kilos applied to paddock 1 in January, February. But I suppose now when we have a record put in, you can see there that it's after updating that we have 28.3 put in. So roughly we're after meeting our target.